Hello and welcome to a special episode of Norfolk Screen Talks. Today we are talking all things Joe in an exclusive interview with the director Tom Brittney. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Joe, it is a short film adaptation of the feature script and award-winning novel The Whale Tattoo, written by John Ransom. Now, the short film joins Joe, our protagonist, played by Ruaridh Mollica, hiding in an empty house as he's being tormented by a ruthless enemy, played by Harry Anton, and haunted by the ghost of a lost love, played by Jack Garner. Now, as he falls into memory, he feels that only he has to now face and confront his past. This film and the novel come together to make a beautiful and compelling and thrilling watch, focus on LGBT representation and working class stories. Now, in this interview, we discuss everything from this film, from adaptation to casting to production design, and even touching on making movies in this climate of the industry today. So please enjoy this, and I hope you learn as much as I did. So let's just dive right into it. So starting from the beginning, when did you first come across the book, The Whale Tattoo? And when did you start to think that you should create this into a film?
Well, so it was, I was doing an audition with my agent at the time, John Summerfield at Waring & McKenna. I was just doing an audition. I was just about to leave. And he just said, oh, there's this book that I've been reading, The Whale Tattoo, and I think you should try and produce it. And he originally wanted me to be in it. He was like, I think you should try and put yourself in as Doug, who is one of the lead characters in it, and the brother of Joe, his boyfriend, Fish, his boyfriend, sorry. And I read the book. I got it that day, and I went on holiday and I just read it all in one sitting. And I thought it was one of the most incredible books I'd ever read. I'd never read anything this sort of, you could smell and you could taste the book as well. I'd never seen something that had gone into trauma in the way it had through Joe's journey in the book. John Ransom, who wrote it, his prose, I mean, it's his first ever book, and you'd never think the confidence he had to write something that gripping and that raw. It just completely, I became obsessed with it.
On wanting to tell this story in particular, how did you have many conversations with the writer himself, John? How long were you developing the script for before it became the tangible film that it is now?
I did have a conversation with John. I was really fortunate that because once I read it, I just wanted to make it. And that's all I became obsessed with. So I managed to get hold of John, and I was filming this show Grantchester I did for ITV, where I played a crime-solving vicar. So we filmed in Grantchester outside Cambridge, and he lives not too far from there. And so he came down to set, and I was there dressed up as a priest, and I took him into the church that we were filming in at the time, just on lunch break. He sat with me he stayed all day on set just to watch us film, but I got to sit down with him for maybe 2 hours and just firstly gush about his book and just say how incredible it was, and just tell him what my vision was for it, how the film that I saw in my head and the one I wanted to tell. And luckily he could, I hope, could see something in me and could see that I was doing it, from there was real passion in that. And he said, well, let's do this. And so we got the rights to his book through my company that I run with my best friend Oliver Powell, Wildness Pictures, and we got the rights to the book. And then John just said, I want to write the script, which you don't always get. There's a few books that we've got the rights to, and you don't always get the author wanting to write it. But me and Ollie went, yeah, like who better? Who better to write this kind of unique piece than the person who came up with it? And John, he'd never written a book before he wrote The Whale Tattoo, and he'd never written a script before he wrote The Whale Tattoo. And in both cases, he just knocked it out of the park. I mean, his first draft for the film was like, this is it.
That's amazing.
And we went through a few drafts, just to sort of tweak it a little bit. And because it's always that thing of adapting a book to a film is there's some artistic license you need to take. It adapts slightly from what it is on the page to what you have on screen, especially when you start getting a clearer vision of how you're going to shoot stuff. And he's been the best person to work with, the most collaborative writer I've ever worked with, of just like a real teammate of us doing this journey together. So it's amazing.
The casting, I think, in the film, the casting is amazing. I mean, lead performance from, I think I got this right, Ruaridh Mollica, I believe.
Perfect. Yeah,
Perfect.
Rory.
I had to do my
Rory.
research on that one. You just like every second of the scene he's in, you can't take your eyes off him. And it is amazing. I mean, you've also got Jack Garner, playing Tim Fish, always being able to feel like his numbed kind of like attitude to the whole world that he's in. And then, of course, Harry Anton playing Doug in his terrifying performance later on in the film. I
Yeah.
just want you to tell us a bit about the casting process and, how did it feel and how long did it take it maybe to finally find, your Fish, your Joe, etc.
Well, obviously, getting your Joe is the most crucial part. You're with him, even in the short, you're with him continuously for 20 minutes. But in the feature, and I wanted the same person who played him in the short to be. I wanted to find my Joe and our Joe. So even though it was just for the short, you're still bearing in mind the whole feature film. And Rory's agent actually was a huge fan of the whale tattoo. And so when we put out a press announcement that we got the rights to the book, and his agent, Greg Hurst at Conway Van Gelder Grant, he contacted Ollie, my producing partner, and said, I've got this actor who would be perfect for Joe. And we were holding auditions, but I'd watched some of Rory's stuff. He'd done a short called Too Rough, and that won a lot of awards, and he was fantastic in that. And then I was sent Sebastian, which he just got a Biffa nomination for Best Newcomer, and he's incredible in that as well. And I was, we still saw a few people, but I knew in my heart, even before I met him, that was my Joe. And lo and behold, he came in and he knocked it out of the park in the audition. And I was like, this is him. And I can't imagine doing it without him. I mean, he's an incredible talent. And I was so fortunate that we managed to get him because his star is on the rise. At the moment he's shooting a Marvel series.
Yes.
He's done loads of TV series and films, and I was really honored that he loved the short film script that we'd made and wanted to be part of this. And then so with Fish as well, with Jack had never done a screen job before. He's pretty fresh out of drama school. In fact, I think he'd only been out of drama school maybe a few months. And we were looking for red-headed actors because it's a very big part of the film that Fish has got this red hair. So you're looking for that, but then you want to find the best actor regardless. You can change all that superficial stuff. But Jack came in and again just nailed it. He brought he had that real mix of vulnerability and fighting with the masculine strength that he's trying to keep up, that his character's trying to keep up, but underneath is kind of a broken person. And when he came on set, and like I said, his first ever set, and you'll know from seeing the short, the scenes are difficult, whether that's being in a bathtub all day having a quite intimate scene, or there's the other scene where Fish's death. Put him through the ringer, and short films are tough as well. They're tough shoots, and he just smashed it. And then finally, Harry Anton, he's a good friend of mine. We'd never worked together, but I'd seen him act before, and I thought he would be great as Doug. Like he's got a real rough kind of edgy kind of energy about him that I knew he could do that terrifying threat of violence that you see from Doug.
The story's potency, I think, really does bleed through in its visual aesthetic, done through your location choices, your production design, the DOP work. How did you work into the design to reflect the strong point of view that you wanted to tell?
Well, I mean, I had a lot of photographic references. I do photography myself, so like I try and think quite photographically. I love certain quite stark, again, like kind of documentary photography. So, but also then gorgeous landscapes and more ethereal kind of things. So I had like a whole book of those. I made loads of kind of packages of just images and feelings that I wanted to get from this. And the production designer is my fiance. Her name is Betsy Seal, and we met on a job that I did years ago when she was the assistant set deck, and she's always been so supportive of every project that I've wanted to do. But this one in particular, she read the book and she could see it in her head as well. And so it meant that as a team, we were just brilliant. She could take the feeling. If I said, I want Joe to feel isolated in this room. I want it to feel sparse and run down. He hasn't been here a long time and it needs to feel dirty. Everything needs to feel dirty and grimy. And I want the audience to sort of be able to taste and smell, the same as with the book. I want them to taste it through the screen. You can feel the dirt in people's fingernails and in the grouting on the wall of the bathroom. And so, the flat that I'm in right now was completely taken over by just all of these incredible props and set dress that she got. So we had like petrol canisters, and we had she did costume as well. So she was doing two jobs at once. So our bath was full of this like murky brown tea stained water to like make Joe's t-shirts all seem like lived in and brown. Yeah. So my flat looked like Joe's flat for a little bit.
All the coloured underpants as well everywhere.
Yes, exactly. Loads of underpants. And ones that you had to do various stages of staining and stuff. But I couldn't have done it without her, because she was just incredible at, like I said, taking what was in my head and her head and putting it onto the screen. Production design is one of the biggest parts of it. The way that she blends in all the colours, the blues of his room. That every single piece you see on that is purposely put there. There's sort of reds in every scene. There's a little bit of red, whether it's the petrol can or there's other bits dotted around his house that kind of tie into this. She's a genius. And I mean, the DOP that we had, David Proctor, is very talented. I worked with him on a BBC thing I did years ago called Won't Be Famous, which I thought was beautifully shot. And I asked him if he'd come on board this. And yeah, it was great, kind of picking out the lenses and the way that we wanted it to feel, the sort of dirtiness of the lens, to make it not feel too clean and too, it wanted to be cinematic but not too modern. And then you go into the grade and you kind of break it down a bit to make it look more filmic and grainy. So yeah, all of those people coming together, and that's how it takes so many people to get that thing on screen, but I luckily had a very good team.
I just want to touch, Norfolk Screen as well. Location scouting itself was a big part. I understand you filmed in like Norfolk, Essex, and London as well.
Yes, we did.
So I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about, how you ended up choosing all these locations around, this quarter of the country.
Well, because the book is obviously set in Norfolk, and Norfolk, it's such a particular place. I hadn't spent a lot of time in Norfolk, but I went for like a kind of pre-recce. I went to King's Lynn a couple of times just to see this place that is described in the book, and it was just amazing seeing that, like, even though I said it's not set in a particular period, but it's probably the past in some way, that it still retains exactly the feeling of the book. It's what, and this isn't in any way derogatory to King's Lynn, because it's still a beautiful place, but it's got that essence when you have those kind of towns that are, it's kind of far from Norwich, the city centres, the same as where I grew up in a place called Gravesend, that's like far enough away from London to feel a little bit in its own bubble. These towns that used to have massive industry, that doesn't have a massive industry as much anymore. They kind of get left behind, I think, sometimes. And I think that there's a beauty in that, and there's a simplicity in that for people. It's nothing against that, because I think it's great when people just they're born and raised in these towns, and their family will continue to live there. And there's some people who desperately want to get out, like Joe. But it was very important to try. I mean, we wanted to film as much as we could in Norfolk. When you're doing a short film, you've kind of got budget restraints. That means, if you've got a whole, we had some crew members from Norfolk that Norfolk Screen helped us get. We had some runners from like local universities to come and help us out and get some film experience. Yeah. We couldn't film everything there because most of our crew were in London. So we chose to do a little bit in Peckham, which is the interiors of Joe's bedroom and the bathroom. But the kitchen is in this incredible place that I think the Norfolk locations got us in touch. Like it's like a beach house that's so we had a beach that we needed to shoot on, but it's completely isolated. It's just this beach shack that's completely away from everything. And of course in Norfolk everything's very flat. Yeah. So you've just got this huge expanse of of flatness, and just really isolating the fact that this place is all on its own. And the interiors were great. Again, Betsy made them even better, but it was perfect. And so we just made everything like, okay, we've got to try and make a schedule over 3 days that we shot, that we've got to somehow shoot there, and there, and make this work. And it was very, very tight. I mean, the last place that we shot, the last day was Essex, and it's where Joe is shouting at the river, having the argument with the river. And it was this incredible, these old concrete barges from World War II that had just been left, and they were rusted and rotten, just in the sort of silt of the Thames. But it reminded me again, it didn't look too dissimilar from where I'd seen in Norfolk, the places that kind of have a bit of industrial mixing with nature. And it just looked perfect, having that sort of boat graveyard. So it was a bit ambitious for us to shoot in so many places, but we pulled it off.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you came about, approaching Norfolk Screen, and kind of what steps went from, talking to Norfolk Screen and ended up actually at the location itself?
Well, when we were pitching around the feature, we were trying to build as much of the kind of production crew of it as we could. So we were taking it to places like the BFI, in which it's quite important that you have as many heads of department to kind of basically go, look, we're reasonably ready to go. There's obviously loads of steps, but like we have head of costume, head of makeup, we have the head of sustainability, all these kind of things. But the one thing that obviously we needed was someone who would help us with the infrastructure and logistics in Norfolk, which we didn't ourselves have any contact. And so I just looked up, that exact kind of thing. Who makes films in Norfolk? What's their sort of film board? And then found Norfolk Screen. And I just shot off an email to Claire, who runs Norfolk Screen, and she called me back and was just very enthusiastic. I think she may have seen me on TV, so she'd seen a show that I did and was like, oh, why? So you're directing now? And I was like, well, I'm trying to. And she was great. She set us up with someone at on the Norfolk City, in the Norfolk Council, in King's Lynn, who took us around, showed us the roads that they can close down, showed us the places we can film. So it started making what was on the page a reality. We started having those people who could make that work, because it's the hardest thing. Like, making films is so logistically tough, because if you ever see a scene where someone's walking down a street, well, they've closed that street down probably for the whole day. A lot of the people in the background may be background artists. The cars driving past might be driven, but you have to make it look like you've just got onto the street, and so you need so many people to help you with that.
I noticed on the credits, actually, it said Haysborough Boat Cafe, I think. Yes. I was just curious about that.
Sticks Cafe, I think, who did our catering.
They did the catering. Oh, that's amazing.
They did our catering for our day in Norfolk, which we filmed on the Sunday, and they are, a 10-minute drive away, and they provided some lovely jacket potatoes.
That's amazing. I thought as much. I just wanted to double check that.
Have you been there? Have you been to Haysborough?
Well, it's only a stone's throw away from me, so actually, I'm thinking I might have to now.
Pay them a visit. They do a great jacket potato.
There we go. Big promo. I was curious if you could tell us a bit about what you've learned most from this project.
I mean, it was very challenging. Making the short in particular was very challenging. Like, shorts are hard. You make them with very little money. You're shooting, quite quickly, and it's a passion project. You don't have the infrastructure that you do on a feature. You don't have the big catering van that does that. You have Haysborough Small Sticks Cafe helping you, but you don't always have that kind of thing. And independent films like that as well. You do it because you love the project. But I think I've learned. What have I learned? I've learned, like I said, how hard short films are. But I'm learning my own voice, I think, as a director. Like, I'm learning the way that I want to show these really hard and heavy aspects of this film visually, and that what the short was a good kind of way to experiment with that. There will be things that I don't take onto the feature, and there'll be things that I do. One part that I really wanted to do was the way that we see memory, so that we see Joe sitting from the present into the past, and the blending of memories, and how fragmented they can be, but how present at the same time. And I think this is such a big part of the book, of him going back into painful memories and memories of Fish after he's died. That I think I learned a lot about how I want that to be seen on screen.
Next, I was just going to ask you a bit about kind of what's the plan for the film? Obviously, maybe you want to delve into a little bit how you hope to make it into a feature and festival circuit and that.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, fine.
I mean, so the short at the moment, we had our first screening, which was for financiers and producers on last week. It went very well. People seemed to really like it, and I was incredibly nervous before because it's such a unique film, and it's quite. I don't know if the word's experimental, but it's not. I don't think it's a standard kind of film. It's a non-linear story. It's following quite a troubling subject, in terms of the trauma in particular. And so I was really nervous about how people would receive it. And I like to think it received very well. So that's now starting its festival circuit. That's now been sent out to some festivals. And, you take months and months to hear back. It's a long journey with those. But in the meantime, we have a feature script that John has written. We have it budgeted. We have everything ready to go to make that thing. And the short being the biggest thing of going, this is what you see on the page. This is how I want to tell this, or the closest to that. So we just got to see how it goes. We've got some meetings set up with some people, and finding the right home for it. It's finding the right co-producers who want to tell this story and trust me and Ollie and the cast and crew that we have to tell it. So we'll see what happens. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I think I'm really proud of what we made. I'm really, really proud. And I'm really proud of what John's done with the script. And I think his book alone is just incredible. But I think the fact he turned it into a script is amazing. So we shall see. We shall see the journey for it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, that kind of drills home the message of, supporting indie films to tell beautiful stories. I mean, you are right. It's not a film or a story that you see at the minute, really, at all. You see big budget films, not many indie films are being made. So it's great, and hopefully in the future it gets picked up, I think. So.
No, I hope so. And you're totally right. I mean, for me, the reason I wanted to be an actor and the reason I wanted to be a filmmaker was because of the independent film that I think Britain was so good for in the 80s, 90s, and when I was a teenager in the 2000s, like Shane Meadows and Andrea Arnold, we were making really gritty independent British film and finding our voice in European cinema. France has always been great at it. Italy, all of the sort of continental countries have a really good independent film industry, we did, but I don't know if we do as much anymore. I think that if you were to look at cinema screens, 99% of it is either big budget blockbusters or remakes.
Yeah.
So with this, I was like, well, okay, let's go out on a limb and try and make something really unique and something that, if you were pitching this, and we'll see, but you wouldn't necessarily think it has. We're in a very risk-averse world in this industry where people are really worried about not making their money back on something. But I think that that's damaged our ability to tell original stories. So I'm hoping that people will want to tell this original story.
All right. That's amazing. Okay. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for your time today. Yeah.
Yeah, you got everything?
I think so. All right,
cool.
That's the cut there. Yeah, thank you so much.